Well, greetings from Gurgaon, India, just outside of Delhi. My name's Dan Smith, and I'm the Dean of the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. And we're here today with one of our famous graduates, Deepender Hooda, Member of Parliament, Kelley grad in 2003. After serving for a little while with Sabre and with McKinsey, he joined Parliament about 6 or 7 years ago. And Deep, it's great to have you here.
My pleasure, Dan.
Deep, what led you to that? You were one of our leaders and you're a rising star with McKinsey, the famous consulting firm. What led you to come back and get involved in your country's government?
Dan, through the years that I was working with the industry, I always felt that there's something missing. And while I was, like you said, I was, I had a very successful tenure there with Sabre and McKinsey, and I was achieving all that professional success. But in my heart, I always felt that I'm not doing justice to myself. I was terrible on haunts of dilemma, whether to go back or just continue there. Then one particular night, after being terrible on those haunts of dilemma for about 2 or 3 months, I wrote down my long-term, medium-term and short-term goals on a piece of paper. And while I was very easily able to articulate my short-term and medium-term goals, long-term goal took a little time. But once I wrote it, I imagined myself as an old man sitting in a room after I'm retired. And I asked myself, what would have made me more satisfied? Achieving a lot of professional success versus I thought that today I have an opportunity to be part of a lot of action in my home country and to contribute something there. So I thought, if I contributed a little bit here, making lives of few people a little better, that would make me much more satisfied as a retired old man. And I remember this was a Friday night when I took this decision, Thursday night, I'm sorry. On Friday, I submitted my resignation. On Saturday, I put my car and house on a sale, and two weeks later I was sitting on a plane back to India.
What an amazing story. As many times as you and I have had dinner together and talked since you've been back in India, I never really did quite understand how you made that transition. So thanks for sharing that. I think a number of our students are going to be very inspired by that story. You mentioned about wanting to make a difference and contribute back to the country. The growth here, at least in Haryana, where we are right now, I was here 5 years ago, and I don't recognize it right now. The growth has been so tremendous, and just the vibrancy and the energy and the people that I meet are so excited about the future of India. Could you describe just a little bit about what you see, and in particular related to the state that you're responsible for? What are your plans for the future? What are you thinking about here in terms of the business climate?
I think, like you alluded to, India as a whole is growing at a very fast pace. And they are expecting that by 2014, India will become the 3rd largest economy. We already are the 4th largest, but we will overtake Japan to become the 3rd largest economy. And some of the numbers that keep coming out are incredible. Last month, we added 20 million new mobile subscribers in India, taking the total number to 585 million, and which shows that the growth is now percolating out from just the cities and the growth centers out in the country. Now, you asked a question about the state. What's interesting about the growth now is that this growth has also led to fierce competition amongst the states in India to get piece of the pie. And I'm very proud of my state, Haryana, which is right next to New Delhi, surrounds New Delhi, northern state. We are, the last 2 years, we have been highest as far as per capita investment. So now, a lot of people look at different statistics, but the fact that we are focused on per capita investment also tells you, Dan, that how competitive the states are. And we are very proud of that fact. To give you an example of the real growth, last year we faced an increase of about 25% in terms of the energy usage. the energy needs that we have as a state, the power usage. So that tells you that actually the growth is happening and spreading very fast, and we hope that Haryana would not only be highest in terms of per capita investment, but also per capita income, and that's what we are working towards.
Oh, it's incredibly exciting. You know, maybe a little bit more broader. I know you're involved a lot, and you're in Washington from time to time. You're involved in helping to bring our two countries closer together, the Indo-U.S. relationship. Can you tell me a little bit about how you see that evolving, maybe how it's evolved during your time in Parliament, but also where you see it going?
Well, I've been, like you rightly said, Dan, I've been very fortunate to be involved in the strategic dialogue between United States and India. US and India, like we all know, we are two nations with a lot of similar thinkings on multiple levels, be it from our institutions, democracy, independent judiciary, freedom for press, to our both shared values of secularism, socialism, freedom for all. So I think there are a lot of common ground to build a very strong relationship. What really I think helped shape this relationship in the beginning was the pure financials and economics, the deepening business ties, and the deepening business ties I must also emphasize were not one way as it is made out to be by a lot of people. It is not just US firms outsourcing to India. It is also the fact that India is the largest, one of the largest customers for Boeing for the last two or 3 years, and that is going to continue. So it is that which provided the backbone. But what was pivotal then was the nuclear deal, which I worked closely with, the Indo-US nuclear deal. India for long had been, what we used to say, that we had been targets of nuclear apartheid in terms of, our intent for usage of nuclear energy was very civilian, peaceful, and we wanted to use it to meet our growing power and energy needs within the country for peaceful means. But in spite of that, the world community was not ready to recognize our need and get us in the nuclear, quote unquote, nuclear club. And that's the leadership provided by Bill Clinton in the beginning, George W. Bush later on, Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Dr. Manmohan Singh on our side, to actually help shape the nuclear deal. And especially I want to say George W. Bush and Dr. Manmohan Singh on our side, and take it forward. I think that was pivotal, and that created a kind of trust. Now the nuclear deal is done. It was excruciatingly long when we were negotiating with our counterparts on the Washington DC. But I think now the nuclear deal is done. I think this has set stage for furthering and deepening ties between the two countries, and I see great future of relationships between US and India on multiple levels, from ties as far as military equipment is concerned, to deepening business ties. US is already number 2 investor in India, and I think that US is soon going to be number 1 investor in India. So I think there are a lot of common ground, and I hope for a bright future for both our countries.
I think it's going to be that way, Deep. I really do. I mean, the business leaders that I interact with on my Dean's Advisory Council, all of them are excited about what's going on in India, and that's really one of the growth engines for many companies in the U.S. So, thanks again for your leadership on that.
And I think that's the essence of the globalization, and innovation in this century can come from anywhere. And I think successful companies will be those who realize that and make sure that this principle gets into their culture. Already, if you look at the Fortune 500 companies, 200 of those have R&D centers in India, and about more than 300 plus are getting their software developed in India. And similarly, successful Indian companies have been those companies like Infosys that I worked with when I was in India, who have been able to tap into talents across the world, source their talent from where it is best, source raw material for production from where it is cheapest, and cater to where markets exist. So I think there is the continuing paradigm shift, what we call globalization as far as the corporate management is concerned. I think the companies who understand the best of that, I think they're going to be the most successful ones.
Well, and there's certainly a very rich source of engineering and technical talent, as you mentioned in the IT area. You know, the country has really developed a reputation for having absolutely world-class, you know, support there. So this is really exciting. You know, if I could move from the broad macro to the more micro now, and you know, you have a very unique perspective, I think, to offer. In that you were, you know, successful in business in the United States, you've worked in business in India, and now as a member of Parliament. I work with a lot of business leaders, and they always ask me, you know, what do I need to know about interfacing with India and competing in India and developing business relationships in India? And Deep, what advice would you give a manager, new managers, thinking about looking more seriously at developing relationships and business relationships in India? What do they need to know?
I think a lot of things. India is, I think, a very diverse society with a lot of contrasts, extremes, ironies. On one hand, you know, Mukesh Ambani was ranked as the world's richest man for a few weeks, and now I think he's second or third. So he was the richest man in the world at one point. On the other hand, we still have about 35% of our population below the poverty line. And similarly, we have these shining centers of shiny urban centers where we see a lot of action happening. On the other side, we have large rural areas which are still very backward and a lot of infrastructural problems. So India is a country for extremes. That's the first you know, thing that anybody who wants to engage with India needs to know. I think building on, another thing that a manager needs to understand is that in India systems exist. There are delays, but systems exist and rightful system exists. We have very strong institutions. The democracy is very vibrant, I would say one of the most vibrant democracies in the world at all different levels, and the participation in the democracy is very high. Even at the village level or the town level, 90% of people turn out to vote to elect their representatives. We have a very, very fiercely independent judiciary, and that although the judiciary has been blamed for delays in getting the justice done, but they have never been blamed for injustice. So that is I think another key pillar in terms of our institutions. We have independent press. As far as bureaucracy and red tapeism is concerned, and corruption there, that's another thing which is definitely there in India, and it exists. The bureaucratic delays, I mean, somebody was telling me that as far as ease of doing business with Indian bureaucracy, India ranks at number 133rd in the world. So, which is you know, just points out. But things are changing, and so that's the other aspect of my advice to a new manager, that things need to be patient. Things will work. India is a country of entrepreneurs. You know, entrepreneurs have been successful here, as they have, I feel, have been successful nowhere else. I mean, Gurgaon, if you the city that you were just talking about, which is in the backdrop of today's interview, this was created by entrepreneurs. No government ever planned Gurgaon. And this was created by entrepreneurs, and it threw a lot of entrepreneurs on the Indian national scene. So the systems are there. People who are patient, people who can work around the bureaucratic delays and rapid tapeism are the ones who have been able to you know, get a lot of fruit out of the Indian growing market. The third dimension of any new manager, what any new manager needs to understand, are the cultural differences. And you know, there are 1,000 cultural differences that I can point out to. I mean, starting from the fact that, Dan, when you asked me for this interview, you said, let's have an interview between 2 and 3. I said, let's have an interview between 2 and 4. Let's keep it flexible, because, I never know if I'm going to be a little late. So, I mean, that is a fact of life here, So starting from that to the fact that it's a very family-oriented culture, and relationships matter much more than relationships matter in other cultures. Objectivity is becoming much more important today, but at the same time, relationships go down to family levels. So some of those finer cultural differences, I think, also need to be borne in mind. But overall, I would say, this is the time when action is happening in India. Things are changing at a pace that I feel we have never seen in, I would say, at least in history of India and perhaps in history of world, because pace of change has increased so much, and this is the time to be here. There are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of sticking points, but at the same time, the outlook is very bright.
It certainly seems like it, and again, related to having US
Of course, on the cultural differences, we cannot forget the fact that we don't have voicemails here. We talked about that to the dinner last night. I mean, the fact that we don't have voicemails, and having voicemails is in fact considered rude. Now that is a pure difference in culture, and those minor, finer details about the cultural differentials need to be kept in back of mind.
I found that example to be amazing, because of course, in the U.S. we use voicemail all the time, and that's considered just perfectly appropriate. So something important that business managers need to understand when they come here. Deep, you deal with so many business leaders, and you've had so much experience around the world, for that matter, in business. Whenever a business leader leaves their comfort zone, they leave their own country, they leave their own culture, and they work with managers, government officials outside their own country. We always make some mistakes once in a while. What's the one thing that business leaders need to watch out for, or is there a certain mistake or two that you see them make when they come to India that we just want to make sure we don't make?
I think I thought a lot about this. I think there's a pattern of I won't say a mistake, but lack of understanding about the system in Indian context that I've seen, and because of that I've seen a lot of business leaders miss out on good opportunities here, and that system here is very deeply neutral, and it would not work for you, and that needs to be understood. System will never work against you. You have to be very, very persistent with the system to make sure it works for you. The most successful multinationals like GE in India, the most successful ones in India, are the ones who have kept at it. Who have not taken pushback from the system as to understand the system is working against them. System here is very neutral. It is not working for you, it's not working against you. You have to make it work for you. So that's what some of the companies like GE have understood. They have kept at it, and that's what has led to their success in India. While I've seen a lot of very good potential projects from a lot of multinationals, in the beginning there's a lot of enthusiasm, but when they see the inertia of system, they just fizzle out. So I think that's what one thing that needs to be watched out.
Yeah. So persistence, patience, understanding.
Yeah.
Take your time, get it right.
Yeah. And be at it. Yeah. Don't be afraid to be at it. This is one of the most populous countries in the world. Keep in mind that the system is dealing with a lot of people at the same time. So the fact that you keep at it, don't think that the other person is going to take it negatively. And that's the key to for success for a lot of multinationals.
Stay at it. Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you. You know, we were talking earlier about the incredible growth and the opportunity here. As you look forward, what keeps you awake at night? I mean, from an outsider looking at it, it looks like, you know, this thing is just humming right along. But you know, as an inside leader, you know, what are your concerns? And you know, what?
I think what keeps me awake is something which I think is one of our biggest strengths. Also, can be one of our biggest strengths. It's a big opportunity, but at the same time, immense challenge. It is the young nature of our demographics. By 2020, average Indian would be just 25 years old, and you know, by 2018, about 80% of our population would be between 18 and 65-year-old, the working age, and we need to make sure that 600 million people enter the workforce in the next decade and get employment. That's almost double the population of United States. So when these many young people will come out there, if we are able to effectively engage them in creating output for our economy, we can get rich dividends. But at the same time, if we are unable to make sure that these the young generation gets good engagement with the economy and the fruits of our growth do not percolate to them effectively, I think we are looking at you know, a lot of troubles for us. Even today, 60% of our workforce is engaged in agriculture, the primary sector, and you know, the rest is secondary and tertiary, the industries and services. We need to very rapidly change that. We need to very rapidly move a lot of the workforce which is still tied on the farms, in the agriculture sector, into secondary and tertiary sector, and that is where I feel that this particular economic rebound after the global economic reset, I think our quality of economic growth has improved. This year we are expecting 9% plus growth, in spite of the fact that last year we had a failed monsoon and the agriculture sector is going to decline by 0.2%, which is very heartening to see. But just 1 year of good manufacturing and services growth won't cut it. I think we need to be much more ambitious. We need to have consistent decade of 10 plus percentage GDP growth year on year basis, and that's how I think we will be able to actually take advantage of our demographic dividend. So my concern, to sum it up, that the demographic dividend that we have, which can catapult us into a leading economy of the world, should not turn into a demographic disaster.
I mean, it's got to be quite a challenge to balance all of that, and good luck as you do it. As you mentioned, I mean, you're talking about a growth rate of entering into the workforce. It's, you know, twice the size of the U.S. population as a whole, so it's amazing to see. As we think about the relationship between government and business for a moment, we see this evolving in the United States. We see it evolving over in Europe. How do you see the role of government in business in India today?
I mean, I think it has changed dramatically since the early 90s. Before 91, we had in India what our economic policy was influenced by the Fabian idea of socialism, and it was a social democratic, if you would, in terms of our principles. How we wanted a big government, we wanted government to eradicate poverty, we wanted government to create jobs for our people, we wanted government to build infrastructure, we basically wanted government to do it all. In 1991, we were faced with a very severe economic crisis, and we at one point India was faced with the balance of payment crisis as far as our foreign trade is concerned, and that proved to be a blessing in disguise, because the government on that day decisively thought that we need to change to a much more a free market economy, and the process of liberalization started. In the last 2 decades, we have not looked back, and the government is now much more seen as an enabler. A lot of people like me strongly believe that one of the keys to eliminate poverty for a government, one of the keys to eliminate poverty is to provide opportunities for entrepreneurs to turn ideas into wealth and job. Very simple. To provide opportunities to entrepreneurs to turn ideas into wealth and job. And if you do that by just being neutral and provide to just enable that, then a lot of what a lot of people are expecting from the government a lot of problems will go away. So I think the government is becoming much more of enabler now, and the process of liberalization the last 2 decades have really led to growth of a lot of these entrepreneurs. Gurgaon is an excellent example, and most of the Indian top 10 Indian companies, top 50 Indian companies have come in the last 20 or so years. And before that, for the previous 40 or 50 years, the top 10 Indian or top 50 Indian companies almost remained the same. They might have changed their positions in the top 50 list, but they remain the same. But last 20 years, we have seen the process of economic growth and liberalization throw up a lot of these entrepreneurs doing incredible things that we never expected to see before. When I worked with Infosys had total revenues of, I'm talking about 1999, total revenues of 10 million. Last year, Infosys celebrated a year when the net profit crossed $1 billion. So the scale of what we've been able to achieve in the last 20 years has been incredible, and I think the story will keep on going.
It's incredible, and the results speak for themselves. To build on that discussion just for a minute, when you think about the role of business and government, you have just, again, such a unique set of attributes that you're bringing to the table from your experience in government, experience in business, and your background in a world-class business school. How did your preparation in business school prepare you for what you're doing today?
Well, I think a lot of what I learned at Kelley is giving me the edge today, or differentiating me in terms of how I deal with certain situations versus how other people would. As politicians, I think people are trained to be very process-minded. I'll give you an example. If the bridge that you were just talking about, Dan, that you've seen built up in the last 2 years, this bridge were being constructed. As politicians, the instinct would be, okay, there's a bridge that needs to be constructed. We need to follow a process in which we need to go to the Environment Ministry to get a clearance that it does not affect the environment. We need to have a process to make sure that, from a traffic control standpoint, and so on and so forth. Also, as what I learned at Kelley in the business school, I'm very project-minded. I'm thinking about deadlines. I'm thinking about what are the things that we need to do and when to make sure that this gets done in time while following all those processes. So I think the mindset, of thinking in terms of project and process, I think that was a very important learning from me at Kelley. I participated in a lot of case competitions. I think that those case competitions, the kind of learning that I got while participating in those case competitions helps me on a daily basis. You know some facts when you're arguing for a case. You make a stand based on the best of your judgment, to the best of your ability, and then you defend that. And that's what we do on a daily basis in the Parliament. I'm just running back from. I'll be running back to Parliament just now, and I'm going to be speaking on a debate on price rise, and I will be making a point. I'll be making my stand there, and I've been doing that, and I think the preparation that I got at Kelley is helping me on a daily basis as far as succeeding in some of those debates are concerned. Because when you're participating in a case competition, you're not only giving your point of view, you're understanding others' point of view and answering based on that. Of course, the other things like critical thinking. One of the things that I think it's helping me, but I feel that perhaps we can have more of that in the curriculum at Kelley. Would be leadership, the leadership courses. I remember having gone through some of the leadership programs at Kelley. I don't remember the name of the explorer now, but the person who went to the Antarctica.
Oh yes, I'm blocking on that one too. I know who you're talking about.
But that I mean the whole story of him going to making that exploration to Antarctica, pursuing his vision and the leadership that he. I mean, I think we need to have many more courses like that, because a lot of technical education that Kelley gives is excellent. I think it's world class. I think when we can combine it with some of the softer attributes that can be taught, like leadership too, I think that would be helpful.
It certainly has worked for you. It's just been so delightful to watch your growth, Deep, and where you're headed. You graduated from our program at the top of the class, and you bring great honor to the school every day. As we wrap up our discussion here, what advice do you have for students today? There are so many graduates coming out of business schools. Any particular piece of advice that you'd have that has served you well over the years that you'd pass on to today's graduates?
I'll go back to the question that helped me make up my mind in deciding to come back to India and doing what I'm doing today. The students should take out time to list out their goals in life. And when they are listing out their goals in life, they should classify their goals as short-term goals, which is the next 2 years, 3 years, what they want to achieve just after school, what are the kind of companies that they want to work or firms they want to work in, etc., so on and so forth. Medium-term goals, 5 to 10 years, that where do they see reaching out in 5 years or 10 years, maybe reaching getting a lot of success within those firms or companies that they join, starting something of their own, etc., etc. And finally, which is the most important question, what is their long-term goal as defined by what would they have done in their lives that would make them happy when they're retired and as an old man or woman sitting in their room alone. What would they have achieved that would make them happy and satisfied with their lives?
It's a great way to approach it. It's a great way to think about it. Just a final question. We take a lot of pride at the Kelley School in being a school of the world. And do you have any thoughts on, for our international students who are looking at the Kelley School or who are even there now, any thoughts on that at all?
I mean, I think first thing I'll say that they've come to the right place. I feel, over the years I've had experience of interacting a lot with, some of the students at Harvard. I've been to Yale. The leadership programs they run a leadership program for legislators and politicians there, and some of the other top tier schools. And the kind of atmosphere, environment that Kelley brings to table, I think it's incredible. It is just compared to any school in the world, it's just world class. And so my first thought to them would be, congratulations, you've come to the very best place. I do feel that a lot of times the international students think that perhaps they're not getting as much attention as needs to be given to them. And to that I say that that's the way of the world. That's what they're getting taught for. That's what they are getting ready to face the world. The world is going to be like that. The business world is going to be like that. And immediately as soon as they are out of the walls of the university, they will face that. So it's better to get prepared at the school. So I think I wish them all the luck, and my advice to them is to take it with optimism, take it with positivity, and do not take it as a challenge, not as something that's a roadblock or with any amount of pessimism. That would not help, neither now nor after you graduate.
Fair enough. Good advice. Deep, it's always a pleasure to see you. Whenever I visit India, you're always a gracious host to our students, to me, to our staff, and it's absolutely an honor to follow your career. So all the best as you go forward in the future.
Dan, it is my pleasure to be interacting with you, somebody that I've always looked up to. It has been an absolute joy and pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.